Alright everyone, we've got the biggest news yet about the next Helldivers 2 update. The former CEO Pilstad just shared some updates on what's changing. There will be changes to the Bile-Titan and the Charger, and also to the 500 kg bomb. There's a lot more to discuss. If you want to support the channel, just hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The CCO, Mr. Pilstad, began by posting a message in the Helldivers 2 Discord chat, essentially updating us on what they've been up to and how the next patch is progressing. He specifically mentioned that playfulness will play a big part, with the challenge aspect being secondary. With that said, here's what he wrote in the chat. So a quick update. I've been working closely with the team to look at the game experience, balanced mostly with the team. We are confident in the update that we are creating that will see a significant meta shift and bring the game into a state where the playfulness takes the front seat and challenge is secondary. I've had a good time with the experience shift, and it is closer to the original intent of the game and what it was at launch. This is what I like to see. It's great to know that the update will mostly contain balance changes and that the patch should introduce some new metas as well. Now, I think it's fair to say that the last 3 patches really disrupted the flamethrower meta along with the IE breaker shotgun. Speaking of which, I wonder if we'll see those changes first before we see what I'm calling the meta update, although I'm sure they're not just buffing weapons, but will also include notes about certain bugs or, issues that have been patched. Which, by the way, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Next, Pilstad responded to a player on the Helldivers 2 Discord. This player expressed that the CCO statement about the update aligning more with the original intent of the game does not instill sort of any confidence whatsoever. Pilstad wrote back, offering some details of what the developers were mainly focusing on with the balancing. Here's what he said. Thank you, it's a good point of view. We have seen internally that there has been a shift in what that is. Balance and nerfing and buffing are elements that we, during the majority of development, avoided. We focused on making an experience that made sense. After launch, I think the discussion of meta, data-informed, and balance took the overhand and replaced our focus on creating a fun, playful, and fantasy-driven experience. Well, I think it's quite interesting that he mentions their focus this time around is all about creating fun rather than the usual nerfs, buffs, or general balancing. With that said, I wonder if Arrowhead is aiming for a more organic experience instead of imposing numerous changes that might not be well received. The last thing we need in this upcoming patch is to contain a bunch of changes that might be considered bad. The other side of the coin is that this update really needs to be tested by the QA team, otherwise it'll be the same story as usual. Since we're on the topic of a QA team, he also informed a player that this time they're taking testing very seriously and are going to double down on QA. He wrote this in response to a player who asked when the update will be arriving. The CCO or the developer wrote back and said, in my view, too late, but we are doubling down on QA this time around to not F it up. A good update with stability issues is a bad update. Then again, a stable update with bad changes is the same. We need to do good on both parts. I'm sure you've noticed that he didn't specify when the update is coming, but instead gave this player a different answer. Anyway, I think this is great news, though we'll see how it goes. Right now, we're just hearing that it's going to be amazing, but we don't know if it really will live up to the developer's claim. It's debatable, I know, because the last few patches have been highly disappointing, so take it for what it's worth. Don't get too invested in this idea that it might be the best patch ever, because who knows if it will be. We're just hearing that it's going to be great, and it will have the original intent of the game, so take it with a grain of salt. Continuing on towards the third question, which was whether the developers could make it possible to reuse a magazine later if we decide we want to reload. For instance, if you were to shoot a bunch of bullets and then reload, the game would consume the entire magazine, preventing you from using it later. Pilstad responded to this player's question about that, but there's no word on whether or not it's going to happen. The CCO wrote back and said, we actually said during development that realistically you'd put a half-full mag in a pocket, but this is movie realism where you just throw magazines with bullets in them away. Okay, to me it seems like we'll see this future change at some point. Now whether it's happening in the upcoming updates, who knows? But I know for sure I'd love to see this sooner rather than later because it sounds like such a cool addition to the game. It would add more depth to the realism because as it stands, I don't think throwing away a half-used magazine is realistic. I mean, if you were being shot at, you wouldn't just dump a half-used mag, right? After like shooting 1 or 2 bullets. So this would be great to see if they decide to implement it. Again, we don't know if it's going to happen, but it's something I can definitely get behind. We're now going to see what the developers had to say about the Bile-Titans and what's to come. If you're not aware, there's currently an issue with using explosives against the Titans. Now, once this update arrives, we're going to be able to inflict damage to both the belly and the head of a Bile-Titan. The CCO noticed a player asking if the Battle Titan could finally receive head damage, and he replied with, "Yes, and the entire belly is susceptible to small arms fire." Now, as much as I want to stay composed here, however, I have to say this is freaking awesome, that we're now going to be able to shoot at the head or the belly to inflict damage. I'm actually going to do a preview in a completely different video once this update does go live, and I'll compare the differences from before and after the patch. That aside, it's going to be fun seeing how the enemies react to different weapons. He also said that the explosive damage has been fixed, as you can see in this post right here. On that note, they're also changing how chargers work by making them more susceptible to damage. The developers specifically mentioned that you can destroy them rather quickly now. And you know, I like this change a lot, but I'm not sure if I've ever had difficulty taking out a charger before. Sure, the flamethrower made it a lot easier prior to the nerf, but I've never found them challenging to deal with. You have several alternatives like using a rail cannon, orbital strikes, EAT, recoilless rifle, and a few others I could list. But you get the point. It'll be a different experience, I'm sure, at least from what it sounds like they're planning to make some positive changes. Next, Pilistad also talked about the Charger's Carapace and how it will still bounce off when using a Liberator. That said, he wrote this in the Discord in response to a player who asked about the Chargers. He wrote back with, "You still have to beat armor, so Liberator will bounce off of Charger's Carapace, but knock it open with an autocannon and pour rounds into the exposed flesh." So I wonder if the exposed parts of a charger will be a lot more susceptible to damage than they are now. But as I mentioned a moment ago, I don't really have an issue dealing with them. However, if they want to make them a tad bit weaker, I don't mind it. I just think that if they make some of the enemies too weak, it's not going to maintain that layer of difficulty, which might be a huge turnoff for many of you who enjoy how difficult the chargers are. Now, if you're wondering if I'm being sour about it, no, that's not me being negative. I'm just questioning how it's going to function and if it's going to see such a significant change to its health bar, that's all. On a completely different note, the developer was asked about the rail cannon. There's apparently going to be more risk and reward with it. When I first saw this, I thought, maybe they'll make it so that the charge is a bit longer than normal, but increase the damage by a lot. That would be awesome if it is like that. Anyway, he answered the question by saying, higher risk, reward, but closer to release in effectiveness. But we know it's a fan favorite, so we are trading carefully. With that said, it's great to know that they're treading carefully here with it, although he used the word trading, I'm sure he meant treading. Anyways, the developers are planning something with the rail cannon. Now again, I'm thinking there's going to be a longer charge time than a powerful shot afterwards that inflicts a lot of damage. At least that's what I'm thinking when he says risk and reward, because what other way would you be risking when using it? Because as of right now, the charge time is decently fast with not a lot of damage behind it. Nonetheless, it's great for taking out gunships, hulks, and some smaller enemies, but there's not a lot of damage behind it. That's what I think anyway. So what do you think the developers are going to do with the rail cannon? Also, let me know what you think about the CCO's response to the charger as well. Now, the Terminids are not the only ones that will receive a change. The rocket Devastators are supposedly going to have their ammo nerfed so that they're not shooting a bunch of rockets out of nowhere. They're essentially not going to be able to reload their rockets infinitely. He wrote back to a player that asked about the ragdolling, and Pilistad wrote, less rockets that hit worse against bots. Also, the rocket collision was 0.5 meters large. It is now 0.1 meters large. Made rocket Devastators run out of ammo and blow their load quickly. These right here are some big changes for the Rocket Devastator and the ragdolling effects as well. They've already done an exceptionally great job at stopping the ragdolling issues with the Impaler. Sure, it's still able to launch you pretty high in the air, but in terms of ragdolling you forward or, across the field, it's not that terrible as of right now. So I'm excited to see what they plan on doing with it and if it's going to be effective. And by the way, a great way to take out Rocket Devastators is with the rail cannon. Speaking of weapons, the developers also informed us that there's a fix for the crosshairs. However, even though he brought this up, he advised waiting for the official news because really you don't know what's going to happen. The response can be seen here where he says, yes, I've heard that crosshairs are fixed across the board, but wait for official info. Also to everyone, I am expressing my point of view. We are a studio of 100 plus, which means our crafted and official messages take priority over what I say. So if there's ever a contraction, the public one is right. So yeah, don't get too hyped up about it until some official news is brought up. It's kind of odd to say that considering he is the CCO, but I guess that's just a way of protecting himself from any sort of backlash if it were not to happen. At least that is what I'm understanding so far, but we'll find out what's going to happen with that specifically whenever this update arrives. And with that being said, we'll move on and talk about the 500 kg bomb. There's a player who wanted to know if the developers plan on fixing the bug with the 500 kg bomb, and Piliste wrote back saying that the 500 kg bomb is in the next patch. So really, this could mean anything, right? We'll now move along and see what the CCO thinks about balancing in general. There's a player who essentially said that he does not want to see any nerfs, and Pilisted's response is interesting because he claims the balancing is bland, which to me is surprising considering the last few major patches or so have all been about balancing, where there was hardly any fun. So the developer wrote back and said, "This is my general belief when it comes to balance. It takes the edge of games and makes it bland experience. I have failed to reinforce this internally. Things should not be OP or UP, but that's it." I've got to say I love to see this, but at the same time, I'm slightly confused because of what I just mentioned previously about the patches. So maybe he changed his mind about things previously and has figured out that overbalancing can pretty much be detrimental to the game. Anyway, I think it's excellent news hearing this from the CCO himself because it's tremendous to see he views it as a boring experience rather than finding it fun, because I don't know if I can handle another patch that completely wrecks weapons in a negative way instead of the weapons wrecking enemies, right? Okay, so the developer also informed everyone on the chat that he has indeed spilled some beans about the next patch, which I don't mind it. I find it as great news because it has to do with the communication. So he wrote this and said, "Anyhow, I am spilling too many beans, but I hope you are excited by this update as I am. The game is more dynamic, more believable, and more tools are useful." Now, as hyped up as this fella is, he also mentioned that the whole patch should be taken lightly and not seen as overhyped. But to be fair, I'm going to make this video title pretty hyped up because to me, these are some big changes that I cannot wait to see. But who knows, he might be downplaying the update, and to be honest, I don't mind it if he is downplaying the patch because it might just be one hell of an update that changes the whole game around. It's something I'd like to see happen for everyone who loves Helldivers 2, especially the developers, so that they have a way of supporting their families and they can just continue doing what they love, which I hope so, you know? So anyways, there's a member on the Discord who brought up a good point that we shouldn't be chugging the hype train, and this member here is not wrong at all because, like I mentioned, we don't know how the patch will turn out. So this right here, the CCO replied with, "Last message, this guy gets it. Don't be overly hyped based on the bean spill. It's too easy to get disappointed. The proof is in the pudding." And with that, that was his very last message on the Discord before leaving. I'm excited but also hesitant about this update. When it arrives, we'll see if there is indeed proof in the pudding. If it's banana pudding, I don't want it. I'm more of a vanilla guy, you know. I can actually recall being at least 5 years old and tasting pudding for the very first time. It was a game changer. Shout out to all the moms out there. Oh, and by the way, I left out one more piece of information about test servers. There's a member on the Discord who said that Arrowhead should essentially say screw the test servers and focus group and just release test planets. I'd love to see that, and it's a great question and a statement at the same time. And Piliste said this in response: "It's a very cool and in-world idea, would love it, but it's technically too much right now. We want to improve the baseline first." Well, yeah, it's not gonna happen, but it was a great question nonetheless. Their plans are still set to have a focus group and do test servers, which isn't bad, but we'll see how the feedback is received from those test servers. Alright, we're now going to showcase the top comments from the previous video. If you would like to have a chance at being featured in the next video, just post a comment down below. The first comment is by Johnny B. Good 8104. Devs patched the game from Game of the Year candidate to here's our 60-day plan to bounce back. The second comment is by Howbrow Stoner Bender 7063. I used to be a Helldiver like yourselves, but then I took an arrow to the... Did someone just wait, whoa. Did this guy just mention a line from Skyrim? I'm pretty sure, right? I mean, arrow to the knee. Anyways, awesome comment, by the way. And last but not least, we have a Brick Sniper. I never thought I'd see a reverse No Man's Sky situation. So with all that news out of the way and the comments, thank you guys so much for checking out the channel. It means a lot to me, and I hope you guys continue to support. So give this video a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.